Welcome to the Bayou City Soccer Podcast. Whether inside or outside the loop, we are talking everything soccer in Houston. Y'all ready? Let's get it.
Welcome to the Bayou City Soccer Podcast. We have a special episode today ahead of the Western Conference Final between the Dynamo and LAFC. Joined by Max Bretos. You can find him on MLS Season Pass. He's the voice of LAFC. Max, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Justin, doing great. Thanks for having me. What an exciting 24 hours lie ahead of us.
Yes. So let's start with Denis Bouanga, the Golden Boot winner. Obviously, 37 goals this season in all competitions. Scored in the win against Seattle last week. What's made him just so dangerous this season for LAFC?
Scored in the game against Seattle. Scored in both games against Vancouver. I mean, he scored in CONCACAF Champions League, hat tricks in 3 different competitions, 4 hat tricks. It's it's interesting to see the involvement of the player, because before he would be this deadline runner, get to point A to point B and get on goal, but he's added a few more wrinkles to his game, and he's at times unmarkable. Being able to fire up on those sides becomes such I mean, really, he wasn't this good of a finisher when he first got here. He is now, and he finds his spots beautifully. It's a force of nature at this point, and it's when you look at teams. I mean, this is a very talented, deep LAFC squad, but the reliance they have on goal scoring with him is, right at the top of the list of any club relying on a player for anything. So you would always think that would maybe change and they'd share the wealth around, and they have a little bit, but it always, when they need a goal, Denis Bouanga's there. And it's like you expect him to score. I would be shocked if he doesn't score in the Western Final. And if the season goes beyond that, I would be shocked if he didn't score in that game. It's just, you expect him to score now.
Yeah, and a little bit off of that, we've seen Carlos Vela kind of come back down to earth from, his eye-popping numbers when he first joined MLS. Is he starting to slow down a little? Is that a little more of what you said with Bouanga and the talented guys around him? Or what's kind of gone on with Vela this season?
Yeah, the numbers aren't there, but he's really had a remarkable season. If you look at what he's asked to do, many times not to play his most effective position or most desired position. I think he's played in every game this season. I know every MLS game, including every playoff game, he plays. So he's been healthy. And the one thing I think about him, and I'm sure he'd like to put the numbers, but when we've seen him after every game, it's all about winning. He's like, well, we need one more win, another win, 2 more wins to get an MLS Cup. That's what he wants. So I don't think he's ever going to be the kind of guy, hey, I'm not getting 20 goals or 10 assists or 15 assists. He obviously he knows that Denis Bouanga is the scoring option, and he will find the work to do to make it work. And I think that's a big part why Denis Bouanga has been able to score, because you still have to pay attention to Carlos Vela, and you still have to respect what he can do. And he knows that. He'll pick his spots. But in the meantime, set up Denis Bouanga, and Carlos Vela has taken to that job effectively, and I think unconditionally, because he knows that's their best bet to win.
Ben Olsen's talked this week. We've talked to him a couple of times, and he keeps mentioning the threat that Christian Oliveira brings up front. He wasn't with LAFC. He just signed this when they played the Dynamo the first 2 games. He signed this summer. So what can the Dynamo fans expect to see from the Uruguayan?
Well, he's got a lot of similarities to Denis Bouanga. It's almost like that accordion of wingers, where you have these incredibly fast guys out wide, and Bouanga's been getting it. And we saw the Kike Oliveira dummy that set Denis Bouanga open on the goal against the Sounders. But Kike Oliveira his stock is rising. He's heading into his really into becoming a really good professional. I mean, he was this young talent that hadn't really fine-tuned his game. But when you look at what he's done with LAFC, he plays every game, starts every game. And now with Uruguay, Marcelo Bielsa adores him, starts a good majority of the games. He just does things that are he takes on defenders. And I think when you have 2 players like that, it just makes LAFC. So if the Dynamo in this case were able to collapse on Denis Bouanga, maybe sacrifice the defender, Kike Oliveira will have some chances. Christian Oliveira will have some chances to exploit that. And I know Ben Olsen's thinking about it, because you can't. The guy's too talented, and even though he hasn't put up these scoring numbers, if you tempt that, he certainly can. I think that's another big part of why Denny's been so effective down the stretch.
Defensively for LAFC, they've been really good lately. It seems like they've kind of rotated a lot of guys through this season. How have they been defensively, and kind of where have they landed now with the guys they have back there?
Well, the rotation that you speak of has happened in the center backs. The last pairing has been Jesus Murillo and Giorgio Chiellini. And now Aaron Long is an elite center back, would start. I mean, he'll probably start a lot of games for LAFC. It's just at this point, that pairing is working. And I think it's with Giorgio Chiellini. So many people, I mean, I don't know anything, but would expect that he's reaching the end of his career. And he's a defender that can do things that really no defender in this league can with his passing. So he's very valuable. But Jesus Murillo and him have really hit it off. Aaron Long, when he's come in, has played well. And yeah, their defense is so watertight. I think when you think of good defenses, you'll think of Seattle, certainly Houston, and LAFC a rung behind them. But they've been so good there with Diego Palacios and Hollingshead healthy. They have been there, but they have good cover in Sergi Palencia. So you have 6 really good defenders for 4 positions. It's an embarrassment of riches, and they have options. So, and now they have an informed goalkeeper. So defensively, I mean, this is really LAFC at their very best, as long as they're healthy, that they're able to do this. When people say, why don't they have a number 9 that can score goals? But they are scoring goals. They're scoring important goals. It's just coming from wider areas.
Yeah, you mentioned him briefly, but Maxime Crépeau, obviously one of his biggest games probably last week in Seattle. I think 7 saves. He was all over the place. Battled back from that injury we saw in MLS Cup last year. What's it been like seeing him come back from that injury and get back to this, extremely high level that he's playing at?
Well, we had him on our Inside LAFC podcast, and I asked him about that, I go, how close are you to 100%? He goes, it feels right. I feel like where I have to be. And we saw it because he had a lot of, over the whole year, we knew it was going to be a long way back, but he hit a lot of hurdles. And I think there was a couple times hey, Maxime might be close. And then a month went by and it didn't happen. So when you come back from a cataclysmic injury like that, those things occur. But he had to be frustrated, but he took his time and it worked out perfectly. He came back with LAFC 2. Then he started getting on the bench. And then eventually his opportunity came. And like a real rock solid number 1, he took it and never looked back. John McCarthy was superb really this season. Being able to become that number 1, certainly when they were playing so many games. But it's a beautiful story, and it hopefully has this great ending here. And even look at whatever happens on Saturday against the Dynamo, for him to have that performance against the Sounders says so much for him. This is a guy who he's out of contract, so he's probably auditioning for LAFC and maybe other clubs. And I think with what he's doing here, that LAFC would love to keep him here because he's one of the best. When he's healthy like this, he's one of the best goalkeepers in the league.
We talked a little bit about just the rotation and the number of guys there. Obviously, Steve Cherundolo, big part of that. His second season at LAFC, 2 straight Western Conference finals. How has Cherundolo kind of evolved these 2 seasons as he's, kind of taken the reins of this team?
I think he's really, he told us that the most he learned was when he was with the Las Vegas Lights the year prior, becoming the head coach, just kind of learning on the road in difficult situations. He's a very utilitarian type of guy, and he has his assistant coaches Ante Razov and Mark Dos Santos and Oko Nikolov, who's the goalkeeper coach, and he empowers those guys. And I mean, I don't want to get too cliche about it, but when you see him training he really puts the ball in the player's court. He's very demanding. There's certain things that you need to abide by the system, but the big issue that he had was having so many fixtures with CONCACAF Champions League and in the middle of the summer where it was overwhelming, but he couldn't really prepare. But what you see now, where he's had a week in between games where he can devise a game plan, you can see what he could do. The Sounders thing, because when LAFC came into the league, they were built as a club that was an entertainer, showtime, like the Lakers. We're going to score goals. And they really, they openly said that. It's like, this is going to be an entertaining brand. And he's provided a little more practical nature, because the reality is you can't always be super entertaining. Sometimes you've got to be nuts and bolts and figure out the best way to get the result, which is what he did there, relying on transition, relying on very good, savvy one-on-one defending. So you can see him adapting and playing. And there's many different results over different games that he has provided, and you could see what he has absorbed as a player as during his time building up to be a coach. That he's got a really good playbook.
Yeah, so the Dynamo, obviously, LAFC played twice earlier this season, way back in June. The Dynamo won twice. So to beat him a third time is obviously going to be tough. But this LAFC team, very different. How have they evolved, since June? How different are they back then? How different are they now than when they were back then in June?
Well, in June, they were teetering a bit because the fixtures got to them. And I know when, Steve Cherundolo would say that, and he goes, look, there's too many, and people will roll their eyes, and you're making excuses. I go, but the reality is, I'd be around training. They looked absolutely gassed. You could see it's not just physically, it's mentally. It's, games every 3 days, no days off, finding a way to survive. And when you get to the back end where they've been able to get full trainings in, I think, first and foremost, and get a team rested and build their depth out, I think that's what you're seeing. They would lean into some academy guys back in June, and there's still some guys there that are involved in that squad, but they have their first choice team across the board, and they have options if they want to go there. That's something they didn't have in June and July when they played the Dynamo, but they certainly have it now. And it really is a case of great timing as well. And look, in good health, Carlos Vela could have gotten injured, or knock on wood, or Giorgio Chiellini, or Denny Bouanga. These guys, anything could have happened, but credit to the staff, because this team is completely fully loaded. Even the midfield with Kellen Acosta and Timothy Tillman, all guys that had some stretches there where they weren't 100%, they're all ready to go. So their full allotment of players, Steve Cherundolo can pick. And there's, I'd say, 17, 18 guys that could start for LAFC and play very well, even in a high-stakes playoff game.
So looking at the Dynamo, obviously Hector Herrera, the star man for the Dynamo, 17 assists this season. What do you think we'll see from LAFC to deal with Herrera in that Dynamo midfield?
I covered a few Dynamo games. I love this story, and to think about them having not made the playoffs in so long and everything in the fall into place. The Ben Olsen hire wasn't universally approved at the time, and even though I had my doubts, I go, what's he gonna do? He's never been really out of DC. They're gonna bring in 20 new players, and it really worked, and that's a testament to Ben Olsen. But when I talked to him about Hector Herrera, because when he played at Porto and Atletico Madrid, he was a defensive midfielder, but he's so much more of a player than that. But that's the role he's going to play there. So he can't, with the Dynamo, and Ben told me this, he can, the keys to the offense are there. He goes, if you want to hit a pass, if you want to shoot on target, you want to take all the set pieces, they are yours. But you see, this year, we always hear how talented Hector Herrera is, but we never really saw the full allotment. We've seen it this year, and he's enjoying playing. He's one of my favorite players. He was before, but seeing him in this capacity, you see what an elite talent is. Because I think a lot of people said he's really good. I don't see it, because he's trying to win ball and be more conservative, because Atletico have all these incredible players alongside him that would do those things that he does at the Dynamo. So that's been great, but they're more than that. Coco Carrasquilla, to me, is right on the fringe of being a best 11 player. Bassi is someone that is just efficient and kind of brings those midfielders all together. But look, it's all paid off. Griffin Dorsey is evolved. Corey Baird, it was kind of on the scrap heap. It's become really serviceable and an essential player. And I think you can say that about, they've hit on most of these guys. And then even Steve Clark, who's almost in his late 30s. There's such a great spirit about this team. That's why I wouldn't underestimate them. and they're going to be very dangerous. But it's like hats off to Pat Onstad and Ben, because they built this team. There's not too many players you go, yeah, that didn't work out. They're all kind of chipping in.
Yep. It's been pretty interesting to watch. So before we let you go, Max, just obviously big game coming up. Just what are your thoughts? Kind of how do you see it playing out? And if you have any predictions you want to throw out there, just how do you see the kind of this Western Conference final playing?
Well, I would think LAFC is going to approach it a little differently. I think they're going to get their feet on the ball, and they'll look for a quick start. When they score first, they are unbeatable. I would imagine they're pretty decisive favorites according to sports books. And like you said, the Dynamo beating this LAFC. If they beat LAFC 3 times, this will go down as one of the great achievements. I don't think anyone thinks they're going to. I don't think they will. But if they do, everything changes, because people are talking about hell is real, the 2 Ohio teams, and what LAFC has been doing. They're the reigning champions, and no one. The Dynamo are a nice story, but they got here, man, and they could do it. It would be huge if they could pull it off. And this is not only to beat them 3 times, but this is LAFC fully loaded and playing their best soccer of the season. So while those 2 wins were huge and I think really set the platform for the Dynamo, it would be viewed as one of the bigger, especially on the road. It would be one of the bigger shockers in MLS playoff history if the Dynamo could pull it off. So I think LAFC wins. I guess I say LAFC wins,
yeah,
but again, I'm cautious about going against the Dynamo because they have defied expectations all season.
They really have. He is Max Bretos. Max, we really appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll do it again next season.
Sounds good. Anytime. Best of luck, but not too much good luck.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening to the Bayou City Soccer Podcast. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.